Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for our webinar, in which we focus on research and exploration in the visual art classroom. My name is Maria Moore, and I'm joined by my fellow JCT visual art colleagues, Terry Lawless, Margaret O'Shea, and Ruth Kennington. The purpose of this evening's webinar is to support you and your students in continuing to develop your understanding of the rationale for and role of research and exploration in the visual art classroom. Before we begin this evening's webinar, we will go through some quick housekeeping items to help you get the most out of this evening's broadcast. Your control panel is going to minimize to this tab on the right, which is called the Grab tab. At any point, you may click on the orange arrow icon to expand or minimize the panel. If you prefer to have it visible for the entire seminar, you just right-click on the icon and unclick the Auto Hide option. We've made some materials available to you within the panel, and we'll be referring to these materials during the session. A recording of this webinar will be available in the coming weeks in the CPD support section of our webpage, where you'll also find resources from our Cluster Day workshops, as well as a recording of our previous 2 webinars. To model good practice, our learning intention for tonight's webinar is to develop our understanding of research and exploration in visual art. We'll spend some time considering how student voice and choice can be facilitated by exploring themes and selecting primary sources, as well as examining the role of visual culture and appreciation in research and exploration. We would love to have you share your thoughts and ideas tonight. Before we begin, we would like you to indicate how your students research in the visual art classroom. In order to answer this, you go to the Poll tab and click on Poll 1. You'll be able to select from a variety of options there. And we're going to pause now to allow time for you to engage with the poll. Thank you for taking the time to answer our poll tonight. As you noted, these are all ways in which our students can research in visual art, and we shall continue to explore this throughout this evening's webinar. So, what does it mean to consider research and exploration in the visual art classroom? Let's consider research. We'll take a few moments to explore its broader meaning. We looked at a variety of sources and found some different definitions. NCCA defined research as to inquire specifically, using involved and critical investigation. The Oxford English Dictionary states that it is the systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions, and that it is to investigate systematically. Whereas the Cambridge Dictionary defines it as a detailed study of a subject, especially in order to discover new information or reach a new understanding. There are many different definitions of the word explore, and they include to search and discover about something, from the Cambridge Dictionary. The Macmillan Dictionary suggests that it is to examine or discuss a subject, idea, etc. thoroughly. Dictionary.com defined it as to look into closely, scrutinise, examine. From our investigation into the meaning of the words research and explore, we can see that the two words have similar meanings, and we could draw a conclusion that research and exploration cannot be seen as two separate areas, but are in fact inextricably linked. Following on from our examination of the meanings, we explored some of the many words which relate to research and explore. Our students could analyse, explore, investigate a variety of options, inquire, probe a problem, wonder, delve deeply into a particular area of interest, experiment with ideas, media, or materials, fact find, embark on a quest, scrutinise different options, question their findings, study approaches by different artists or styles, conduct an inquest into their discoveries, and prepare groundwork for further study. Our visual art action verb poster lists verbs which may be of use when planning. The highlighted verbs are the verbs which are used in the learning outcomes for junior cycle visual art. These lists come from the Think and Explore segments of the action verbs poster, and you'll notice that some of the action verbs are repeated throughout the process. We've used the colours red and yellow to identify the Think and Explore segments. These are a sample selection of learning outcomes from the Junior Cycle Visual Arts specification. Of course, there are many others. It is clear from this slide that our Junior Cycle Visual Arts specification provides us with lots of opportunities for our students to learn, to research and explore. In our Cluster Day workshops, we provided you with a poster of the visual art process, and we spent time discussing this process through the lens of an artist. There are, of course, many other process methodologies which may support and scaffold our own and our students' understanding of the creative process. We've added a copy of these documents for you in the handouts section of the webinar tonight, and we will make these materials available on our website www.jct.ie in the Visual Art Resources section in a recording of this webinar very soon. Tonight we will take a closer look at one of these methodologies, the double diamond design process, which we've adapted for use in the visual art classroom. Design has many different definitions, but at its heart it is about the process of transforming ideas into reality, making abstract thoughts tangible and concrete. Our students often start with a theme, a problem, a stimulus, or a brief. So, let's spend some time in the research and explore phase. At the start of any project is the discovery phase, which involves gathering inspiration and insights, often developing initial ideas. The first quarter of the double diamond model covers the start of a project. Designers try to look at the world in a fresh way, making observations, noticing new things, and seeking inspiration. We encourage our students to gather their own insights, to develop an opinion about what they see, to decide what is new and interesting to them and what may inspire new ideas. Specific methods in the visual art classroom could include research related to visual culture and appreciation, drawing from observation and imagination, and experimenting with ideas, materials, and media. The second quarter represents the define phase, in which designers try to make sense of all the possibilities identified in the discover phase. What matters most? Which aspects should we act on first? What is important? Key methods during the define phase for students of visual art could involve clarifying the area of research, focusing on a particular direction to take, planning, refining ideas, methods, or materials, and editing. The third quarter marks a period of development where solutions are created, prototyped, tested, and iterated. This process of trial and error helps designers to improve and refine their ideas. Key activities and objectives during the develop phase might include brainstorming, problem solving, and identifying a range of ideas, sketching, testing, and prototyping. The final quarter of the double diamond model is the deliver phase, where the resulting artifact is finalised or proposed. Some of the key activities and objectives during the deliver phase for our students could be designing, creating, building, proposing, presenting, evaluating, and gathering feedback. It's clear from this model that research and exploration play a fundamental role in the creative process. Now, I'm going to hand you over to Terry.
Thanks, Maria. As mentioned, visual culture and appreciation is an important element through which our students can research and explore. We're going to watch a short video excerpt during which artist Caroline Schofield discusses her approach to research. The full video is available to watch on our website. During the video, you might consider the question, what does research mean to this artist? Let's hear about the approach taken by Caroline Schofield in her work.
I drew the objects, I start drawing ideas, but I draw in lots of different ways. So I draw in sketchbooks, I draw on pieces of paper. I walk around and I look at things. So in Kilkenny we have the cathedral, and we have, you know, like those tombs in the cathedral and those bodies that really interests me as well. So I go and draw those, I go and photograph those, and I would start collecting imagery and maybe stories as well. In the courthouse there's a prison downstairs, so part of the hanging structure came from the window in the prison downstairs. So again, I would go and draw that and I would look at that. So there's a huge amount of thinking, and it goes backwards and forwards. It's never, if I knew what I was going to make from the start, there would be no point making it because it would be nothing new. I have to wait and I have to do all this work, and it's a lot of work. It doesn't just happen. It's huge work. Is drawing my way of communicating? I don't know. It's a way. It's not a way of me communicating with everybody else. It's a way for me to understand and to see. Drawing is a communication between yourself and the drawing, and your brain and your body has to be involved. It's, you know, it's work. And it's hard work, but it's also really rewarding when it works. So when I'm developing ideas, the process would be, I suppose I've spoken a little bit about it, but it would be very much about, there would be a lot of thinking at the start and a lot of reading books and researching if there's an idea, but also just walking or swimming maybe and letting those ideas come in. That it isn't that you just go straight to paper. So that would be part of the process, and then ideas start to come in and I start working on just experimenting and playing with things, with materials, with drawings. often in my studio, because my studio is a little bit like a sketchbook, so there could be lots of ideas in this space, and I think it's a really good idea when you're working on a project that you don't just keep working on one piece, that you keep moving and coming back and looking and coming back. So that would be very much part of the process. And often a piece that could be sitting for a year or two there suddenly can become part of the work again. I don't think you should, I think we make the mistake of over finishing work, that you work on one piece and it has to be perfect. But you should have at least 3 images that you're working on and keep moving between those ideas.
Okay, we would like you to share what you believe research means to Caroline Schofield, and you can contribute to this Mentimeter by going to www.menti.com and using the code 131413 to share what you believe research means to the artist. Your responses will appear on the screen. We can see there's a great response to this here this evening. So far we can see that 70 of you have kind of contributed. Lots of different ideas coming through there, but some of the ones that are really standing out: exploring, thinking, drawing, experimentation, and sketchpads. They're all coming through quite strongly there. So I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts there. It seems that many of you have identified the importance of using sketchpads and drawing from primary sources in Caroline's process. As we know, one of the main purposes of sketchpads is to encourage students to develop their research skills. A sketchpad is a place in which students can gather information and ideas. It's also a place to problem solve. Art educator Gillian Robinson refers to a 4-stage process of developing sketchpads. The first of which is preparation. She describes it as a way for students to investigate challenges, gather relevant data, and make observations. In sketchpads, students can develop skills of data gathering and action planning, a concrete space to work out ideas. She identifies the 3 remaining stages as being incubation, illumination, and verification. During last year's Arts in Junior Cycle Summer School, participants made and used their own sketchbooks to research and explore. Have we considered the possibility of having our students make their own visual art sketchpads in which they could research and explore? The framework for Junior Cycle places students at the centre of the educational experience. What does it mean to place the student at the centre of the educational experience in visual art? In session 1 of our cluster days, we asked you to share what was working well for you in the visual art classrooms. You identified the positive contribution that visual art sketchbooks made, that they are making to the way in which your students are responding to their own work, and that they are taking ownership and valuing the artistic process. Coupled with that feedback, many of you shared the fact that your students are actively engaging in selecting their own primary sources, which relate to their chosen themes. And as a result, their work is more personal, purposeful, and creative. There are without doubt challenges in encouraging students to research and explore from themes and in identifying and in choosing relevant primary sources. How can we as teachers support our students in this journey? Let's begin by looking at some approaches which may encourage and support students in developing a theme or stimulus. Would we explore themes using free and open approaches with no restrictions, or would we use structured methods and defined limitations? Would we facilitate students to brainstorm alone or in a group? If working in groups, what size of the groups? Will you or the group appoint a recorder? What might that look like? Would it take the form of a large mind map or list? Could it be through rapid ideation, word association games, or World Cafe? Perhaps students could use a visual verbal square. They could use dictionaries or a thesaurus to explore alternate meanings and expand on the range of possibilities. How can students share their thoughts and help each other come up with more ideas in a structured and analytical way? Could they draw parts of their mind map or spider diagram using different media and colour? Would adding drawings and photos encourage them to think differently about the words and meanings that first come to mind? What would happen if students developed a mood board as a method for expanding on their theme? What would it look like if they include sketches related to imagery, examples of visual culture and artists that they have researched? Could they include small objects and samples of things they relate to personally and find interesting? What would it look like if they stored their research digitally? What platform might they use? You'll find a range of classroom strategies in the whole school section of our website, which might support you and your students to explore their theme. Let's continue to consider some other approaches. Could students explore their themes through the lens of visual culture, whether historical or contemporary? Would it be valuable to examine visual culture and appreciation through the student's own experience? What does visual culture mean to them? How does it affect them in their own lives? And how do they communicate through it? Where can students find examples of visual culture in their own environment? Could students explore the local, built and natural environment, looking closely at structures they pass by every day? Would this be as a class, in small groups, or individually? Is it possible to find examples in their school or surroundings, in their homes, the local environment, or perhaps it might be in the wider world around them? Are there issues which personally affect them, their communities, or the wider world? Where can they go to research and examine issues? Is it possible to explore these through their studies in other subjects, in their communities, through news or social media? How can they identify and discern what they discover locally, nationally, and internationally? Sometimes a theme might make our students curious and cause them to respond to contemporary or social issues. How could they describe, examine, research, explore and draw these ideas? What primary sources might our students gather and collect related to their themes? How important is it that they have a personal connection to what they collect? How long will their primary sources sustain them throughout their process? As we know, our specification defines primary sources as Primary sources are sources, physical or conceptual, that are viewed in their original state and not filtered through another person's interpretation of them. In our cluster workshops, you acknowledge that primary sources are contributing to more personal, purposeful, and creative student work. We would now like you to reflect on these methodologies you use with your students to identify, select, and explore primary sources. We'd be delighted if you would share the methodologies you use in the visual art classroom. You can use the question tab on the control panel to contribute to a bank of suggestions, which we shall share via Twitter at JCT Visual Art in the near future. We'll give you a few moments to contribute via the question tab. Okay, we can see that there's some really rich sharing going on there from the suggestions coming in. So we just might give you another moment there before finishing off. Okay, thank you for that. In our cluster workshops, you shared a myriad of suggestions and ways in which your students engaged with primary sources. These included using a shoebox into which each student in the class contributes a small item related to the theme or stimulus. Could it all fit into a shoebox, a matchbox, or would it be something bigger? What benefits would a visit to a local or national gallery as a primary source bring to the discussion? How can we encourage students to identify, examine, and explore the approaches of artists, craftspeople, or designers? What value is there in researching and discussing the use of art elements and design principles, the media used, and drawings made by artists? How might this influence and direct their own personal responses to their themes or choice of primary sources? Could they visit a museum or gallery to engage with artifacts of aesthetic value at first hand? Would their research there influence their choice of primary sources? Could they explore the creative potential to be found in the grounds of a museum, gallery, or local landmark? Would it be possible to collaborate with another department in your school when organising an outing, to use it as an opportunity to gather visual information about a new place? Could students use the structure of the building and their facades as a primary source? What possibilities might there be found in local playgrounds or amenities, such as a park? Could we focus students on identifying a particular art element or design principle? Identifying natural sources, as well as man-made textures and structures. Might students focus on a particular art element or design principle when they're gathering information? Could students use this research? How could students use this research? And how would their choices affect their work? What potential could there be in looking at different viewpoints and angles? Or taking familiar objects and exploring them from different viewpoints? Now, I'm going to hand you back to Maria.
Thanks, Terry. So, is drawing research? Our visual arts specification states that students should appreciate that drawing is the fundamental language to all their work as they learn through the 3 strands. It is essential for inquiry, expression, and communicating visual information. The student's visual arts sketchpad should contain drawing from observation, including primary sources, life drawing, and the imagination. Ideas developed through 2D, 3D, or digital methods should be captured and recorded in it. Much has been written about drawing. Here are some quotes from artists, researchers, and designers. Let's take a moment to consider one of these. The well-known art critic John Berger describes drawing as discovery. For the artist, drawing is discovery. And that is not just a slick phrase, it is quite literally true. It is the actual act of drawing that forces the artist to look at the object in front of him, to dissect it in his mind's eye and put it together again. Or, if he's drawing from memory, that forces him to dredge his own mind, to discover the content of his own store of past observations. The visual art sketchpad, whether physical or digital, is a combination of both, provides opportunities for our students to research through drawing. It may be that students use drawing to chart the development of their ideas or processes. Perhaps they might analyse a primary source. How could our students use this analysis to contribute to communicating their meaning and understanding of a theme or stimulus? Would they make a range of sketches? What possibility could the students identify and explore from their school environment? Appendix A in our visual arts specification contains a host of suggestions, which include looking at samples of artists and culture used for inspiration, investigating methods and techniques used by artists, exploring a variety of different styles of art, craft and design, the analysis of artefacts created by working artists, craftspeople or designers, and notes and annotations on the students' judgments about examples of art, craft and design. Research takes many forms. Would interviews with artists, craftspeople, designers, or other relevant or interesting people be a source of inspiration? Perhaps research might involve exploring the methods and techniques of artists and making annotations and other written notes. What materials would they explore with to make drawings? And how could they show that their drawings relate to a theme or stimulus? Would students investigate the potential which exploring a new media or materials might offer? And how could they research and explore digitally? Would they test and trial the possibilities and limitations of materials? And experiment with new techniques and processes? There are many benefits for our students when they take the time and space to develop a variety of approaches to research and exploration. Let's pause for a moment to hear how one of our JCT Visual Art colleagues reflects on the impact which research and exploration has made in her visual art classroom.
So my students are researching and exploring in a different way. I'm trying to get them to make an emotional connection with the theme so they can get into it in a deeper way than they did. I'm getting them to look at artists and how they approach similar themes. And the process is really important. I'm looking at lots of different potential mediums and ways of making marks and looking at themes. So they're looking at themes in a more abstract way. So it's not just an object they can bring in front of them. It is an object that they can bring in front of them, but it's more abstract. So it's roadsides and pathways, but it's not just something you find on the roadside. It might be a journey through life, and what would that represent for you? So it's not just a boot or a car wheel. It may be, where do I want to go, or where have I been? What countries have I lived in? What does family mean to me? Because they're there on that journey or that pathway for me. What are the benefits to the new processes? I'm finding that research, it's obvious by the work now that the research process is as important as the final artifact or the final piece of work. So the journey is becoming a richer learning experience. So it's not just going into class and today I'm making a piece of clay. It's I am researching something. I'm becoming in depth at looking at it. I'm discussing it. I'm looking at how my other students in my class are doing it. I'm getting them to look at how the Leaving Cert are researching in a similar way. They're looking at how other artists research in a similar way. And this is a skill that spreads across all subjects at junior cycle, subjects at senior cycle. If it's engineering, if it's history, if it's English, it's the same process that they're learning. They'll use the same process in college if they decide to go in that direction. So that process that they are now getting really digging down into is a huge life skill. And it's so important to them. And it's more enriching. And they understand then why they're making a piece of clay or a painting or whatever. What am I doing differently? I'm introducing them to artist work earlier on in the stage. I have to say I was guilty before in the junior cert of sticking on the support studies at the end. And I usually found, oh, why didn't I show this earlier? There's great ideas here. So they're looking at artists very early on in the research process. And it's amazing. They're sort of surprised that there are such people out there as artists, that they're living beings out there doing and making and researching art, and they have social statements connected to their art. Sometimes it's the materials that they use, it might be environmental, it might be about their own life events that have happened to them. That art is not just a pretty picture, it's a statement. It is social, it is forming change, and that art is a vital part of the human experience. And that's starting to come out in the art room. Whereas before it was, Miss, can I make something out of clay today? They didn't get that there was a journey to get to the clay and that the journey was important. Now they're seeing the journey.
There's no doubt that as we develop the learning outcomes in the visual arts specifications, we are supporting students to research and explore, which is part of the rationale for the junior cycle visual arts specification. Let's take a moment to reflect on the rationale in the following video scribe.
Visual art is a subject that promotes teaching and learning through art, craft, and design. For us young adults, this involves becoming familiar with and applying the elements of art and the principles of design. and the knowledge and skills associated with these processes, their histories and their contemporary practices. Visual art also recognises and rewards a number of different forms of intelligence, including emotional intelligence. It develops personal qualities of expression and empathy. Visual art encompasses art, craft and design, and involves practical work in a wide range of media leading to a specific outcome. Example, an artwork, a design, architectural study, an installation, an event. Making art develops our imagination through developing an idea or concept and allows us to exercise personal responsibility for specific tasks. Visual art is ambiguous. There is no single correct answer in visual art. The subject promotes divergent thinking and develops our ability to interpret, make judgments, and express opinions on work. It also promotes respect for the work and opinions of others. Visual art provides us with the space within which it is safe to experiment, to fail, and to learn. It allows us to collaborate on ideas and work. It facilitates and encourages the questions that we may raise in travelling a path that may not lead to an anticipated outcome, or that may produce a different outcome to what was planned. It gives us the capacity to understand and to express ideas, feelings, and opinions, both our own and those of others. We will develop the transversal skills such as creativity, collaboration, ability to question, risk assessment, problem identification, problem solving, and management of our own emotions that form a natural learning mechanism that can enhance our own development.
Now, I'm going to hand you over to Ruth, who's going to address some of the questions that are frequently asked during our workshops.
Thanks very much, Maria. I'm going to go through some of the questions that you've been asking. Okay, so the first one is, during brainstorming, my students come up with really personal ideas, but then don't bring in primary sources that relate to the idea. Okay, so this is a question that we all relate to. And some of the suggestions that have come from you in workshops are, we could consider the themes that we're exploring in class. Are they relevant, accessible, and have meaning to our students? Do they tap into their interests, hobbies, or achievements? Could we look at the value and relevance of the objects through discussion and debate? Can we explore the story or the history of the primary source and what the object represents or symbolises for them in order to motivate students? Maybe we could devise a brief or look at a theme that utilises primary sources that are readily available, like the school environment, their home or surrounding areas. Or we might plan a school field trip to a gallery, a museum, or perhaps a forest park and gather primary source references there. Identifying and selecting primary sources and interesting sources is an intrinsic part of the artistic process, and it's really definitely important to keep trying. Another question is, can my students draw from their own photographs? So as we've already seen here tonight, there are many ways in which our students can explore a range of primary sources, and some of these methods may involve moving outside the visual art classroom. In this case, our students could use photography to record what they see and observe, and they could be encouraged to record their sources from a variety of angles or viewpoints. They could ask themselves the question as to what is the purpose of the photograph, rather than working from observation. It is important that students learn to value and understand the difference between drawing from an object from direct observation and drawing from a two-dimensional representation of that object. Another question here is, I teach in a special school setting and some of my students find research very challenging. How can I help them to research? Okay, so it is important to consider the needs of our students and taking the time to find out their strengths and what motivates them to learn and how they learn. This will certainly give us a much greater understanding of their learning needs and their experiences. We could also think about how they might access content. Are there visual references? Are there supporting texts, motifs, keywords, or other opportunities to engage with content? Perhaps students could research and explore in a sensory way, through music, touch, or scent, to express what they've learned. Could we provide them then with options in how they choose to demonstrate what they've learned? We also could consider involving them in the design of the learning experience or the process. This will encourage our students to develop their own voice in their learning experience. Is imagination a primary source is another question. Yes. So our visual art specification states that primary sources are sources physical or conceptual that are viewed in their original state and are not filtered through another person's interpretation of them. A student's imagination is considered a primary source. It's important to consider what it really means for students to engage with their real environment. There are many benefits here. They're more tangible to the students, and they provide more possibilities of engagement with their primary source, improving their focus and observational skills, as well as developing problem-solving skills. Another question that you've been asking is, my students work from their imagination, but then their drawings may be poor, and how could we overcome this? Okay, so similar to the last question, by supporting our students to research, explore, and draw objects from the real world, we will support them in developing their ideas from their imagination. As they develop their skills of drawing from observation, they will be better scaffolded and equipped to draw from their imagination. Another question is, should students work in A4-sized sketchbooks? Okay, so you might remember from the workshops, as teachers, you're free to decide what suits the needs of your own students, as well as the age and stage and the school context. Now, there are many advantages to using a variety of formats, whether they're pre-made, bought or made by the students themselves. We do have flexibility, of course, in terms of format, size and scale of the sketchpads used in the visual art classroom, and this promotes student choice and voice and also encourages their engagement. By using a variety of formats, it offers the opportunity for students to express themselves in an individual way. Another question is, if my students are working individually, is it okay for them to brainstorm in a group or in pairs? So absolutely. One of the key skills of junior cycle is working with others, and it's important to consider all of the learning opportunities that are possible through teamwork and collaboration. In fact, consideration of the students' needs and the focus of their learning experience, this may help in choosing suitable methodology here. And finally, what does the digital aspect involve? And are there important considerations here? So it is important to remember that students can choose to explore through a digital media, for example, using photography, video, animation, or digital drawing, to name a few examples. Some of the important practical considerations could be, whose device is the student working with? Does it belong to the student or the school? What software is being used? And how will the student display progress in their developmental work? Will they be saving screenshots or various stages, etc.? And that's actually all of the questions for now. So I'm going to pass you back to Maria.
Thanks for those, Ruth. Okay, let's revisit some of the key messages for tonight's webinar, and they include: the best way to support students in developing research and exploratory skills is to plan from rich learning experiences from first year onwards. Exploring themes and stimuli that engage our students' interests will develop student choice and student voice. And research and exploration through drawing and with a wide range of media will build students' capacity to engage in critical thinking and foster competence and confidence in responding to and engaging with the visual culture of their own contemporary world and with their natural and built environments. Just a quick reminder that you'll find more supports in both the whole school and visual arts sections on our webpage, www.jct.ie. To keep up to date with the latest news from visual art, we'd encourage you to follow us on Twitter at JCT Visual Art, and to join our mailing list on our webpage. Here you'll also find information about our elective workshops in the Arts and Junior cycle. And remember that you'll need to be registered by your principal or person with management resource hours to book a place. For all your junior cycle visual art queries, you can contact us at info@jct.ie. And a reminder that a recording of this webinar will be available on our visual art webpage in the near future. We'd like to thank you for your positive engagement during our Visual Art Cluster Days this year, and we're looking forward to meeting you on the road again next academic year. A thank you to the Visual Art team here tonight who worked to prepare this broadcast, and a big thanks to Gemma Tierney who's been answering your questions at home, and a special word of thanks too to our team of Visual Art Associates. And finally, we would like to thank you for engaging with us tonight for this webinar, and to wish you and your students all the very best as you approach the end of the school year. Thank you and good night.